We're back. Another episode of the Golden V podcast. Our second of the day, our first being today at 10 a.m., talking to Brett Midsky of the Vancouver Warriors about three remaining games in the NLL season. But here, with another episode of the podcast, I have Vancouver Canadians broadcaster Chris George is joining me because the Vancouver Canadians, to kick off their 2025 season tomorrow, Friday, April the 4th, in Tri-City, Washington, against the Tri-City Dust Devils. Chris, how are you?
Ben, doing well. Thanks for having me here. I'm glad to slide into this nightcap of your double dosage of interviews here. But just got to Tri-City here. Excited for the start of the season tomorrow.
And obviously there's been stuff coming out for quite a few weeks. I mean, if you're following the Blue Jays spring training games, as I don't always get a chance to see them, I pop in to see them on Sportsnet from, third week of February when they started, probably by the end of February, the broadcasts. And I would pop in to watch a Blue Jays game or watch the Blue Jays in 30 repeat. And I'd see a bunch of Canadians from 2024. I saw Peyton Williams. I'm trying to think who else I saw in some of those games. Obviously, before talking to you tonight, went to obviously look at the New Hampshire Fisher Cats tweets and press release stuff about who's on their roster, the AA affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. So I see a number of Canadians have moved up there. We can discuss that a little bit, but let's get started. I'm going to share the screen here for those that are following along, and you're just here doing audio that we're going to repurpose for the podcast. But the C's opening day roster has a lot of familiar faces on it and some new faces. And one of the things I know we discussed last year, meaning you and I, in September when you were on, was Arjun Nimmala, who, to the delight of many C's fans who are heavily into the sort of weeds of the team and following the prospects, Arjun Nimmala is making his debut with the Canadians this week.
Yeah, super exciting. I remember talking to you in September about that and kind of hoping, dreaming that he would get the start in Vancouver. We knew he'd be up probably at some point, but definitely nice to see him start in Vancouver to cap off this year and what a end of the season it was for him, right? He struggled initially with Dunedin in 2024, went down to the complex, kind of got everything settled as far as his swing goes and everything. He was down in the complex for about a month total, came back after that, 15 home runs to end the year. So really ended the year strong, and that obviously led the Blue Jays to believe that he was ready for the next level. So super excited to see him, but that's not it, right? There's more prospects that will be making their debuts. You mentioned the returners. There's 20 returning players. So many returners like, Adrian Pinto, Jackson, Juron Watts-Brown, and some of these, especially pitchers returning. I believe 10 total pitchers will be returning, but along with Arjun Nimmala, you got Sean Keys, who was a fourth-round pick from last year, Carter Cunningham, and Eddie Micheletti, another couple of high draft picks from last year. Both of those guys, all three of those guys, will be really interesting to see how they debut here in Vancouver this week.
Yeah, and one of the things I was looking at, I've joined a baseball rotisserie league, 15-man rotisserie league where you pay money to get in. I'll give it a quick plug because it's run by Bob Marjanovic, who's known as the Moj in Vancouver, a longtime broadcaster. But I joined the Moj's pool, and my point there was I bought Baseball Prospectus. I subscribed to the monthly edition, but I bought the 2025. It's a giant book. You guys probably have it at the ballpark. And I was looking at Nimmala, and one of the things they're saying here about Nimmala is listed at 170 pounds. Nimmala absolutely sacrifices contact for power, putting his whole body into every swing and aiming for the left field bleachers. But it worked particularly following a stint at the development list where he hit slash line at 265, 331, 564 against older competition. There are some interesting notes there from Baseball Prospectus about Arjun, and sounds like his weight or his ability to hit the ball that way. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to him at our media day actually yesterday, and he actually kind of said when he went down to the complex, he was kind of focusing on being shorter to the ball. Okay. So really focusing on making more contact and not kind of getting that long swing where kind of what you were talking about, maybe more of an uppercut swing where he's focused more on hitting home runs. So while keeping short, he actually allowed his power to kind of, be on display in that second half. So I think that's what he's going to be kind of trying to do, more so of just kind of being short to the ball and letting his power just come out naturally. So really excited to see what he does. There probably will be some struggles throughout the year,
I
but
think so.
certainly excited to see what he can do this year.
Yeah, and I just looked at another article from Baseball Prospectus I had Brett Lavalley in November before he knew he was moving to New Hampshire. And so I had a podcast episode with Brent Lavalley, who was the C's manager at the time, and also Jerry McDonald, who runs a site called Batter's Box, and the Vancouver Canadians in-game announcer Niall O'Donohoe also writes for Batter's Box. And one of the things that we were talking about in that particular episode was the play of a guy like Adrian Pinto. And that came up in my conversation with Brent and Jerry in November. And it was the way that a guy like Pinto finished the season, plus his performance against the Spokane. I just got it here. Let me take a look at the one of the games I had against Spokane, right? And so, like, I remember those two playoff games against Spokane, the games at the Nats. So, tell me a little about what Pinto's up to, because Pinto jumped out in the fall league play to me when I read the stuff in Baseball Prospectus.
Yeah, so he came over in that trade with Colorado. That was the Randall Grichuk trade from a couple of years ago. And if it wasn't for an injury to start his year last year, there's a good chance he'd be in Double-A, maybe even higher by now, because he only really played towards the end of the year with the C's last year. And as you mentioned, he played in the Arizona Fall League, trying to make up for that lost time. So I've really liked what I've seen from Pinto, and I think it's only a matter of time before he hits himself out of Vancouver. Just a really kind of a smaller guy, right? He's only maybe 5'7", 5'8", in that kind of Jose Altuve mold as a second baseman, but boy, can he hit, and he's got power. Don't let his size fool you. He can hit the ball out of the yard and play good defense as well. So he's got kind of an all-around tool set, and can't really wait to see how he develops this year with Vancouver and beyond.
Yeah, and the thing about Pinto was that it wasn't the games at the Nat. It was the game after, I think, games 1 or 2 in Vancouver, where he hit a long home run in Spokane. And it looked like that might actually turn the favor for the season, that game, and it didn't. But still, that was a highlight that I saw that really stuck out to me. And it's funny you mentioned Jose Altuve, because one of the articles I pulled from Baseball Prospectus is an article back in October, and it's called "Notes from the Field: The Arizona Fall League." One of the things they did with Pinto was they compared, and it's funny you pulled up Jose Altuve, because they do exactly that in this little prospect breakdown, and it said this is a fun player to watch. Sometimes those little RHH second basemen in the minors who don't look like much turn out to be superstars. Jose Altuve, Jose Ramirez, and here Prospectus is saying Pinto has a free swinging, excellent bat to ball, contact oriented approach. I don't know if I have any other stats on him here, but you said what Baseball Prospectus had said back then with his Arizona Fall League performance. I don't know if you intended that or what that was, but it's funny how you made that comparison, and really what is one of the industry professionals pieces of literature. And I talked to a scout about it at the ballpark last year. When you've got yourself and people like or books like Baseball Prospectus quoting stuff about Pinto, that's telling you something, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think him being a shorter guy, on one level, it's kind of a lazy comparison for me, right? To compare him to Jose Altuve. I'm seeing he's actually listed at 5'6", so I may have given him an extra inch or two by saying 5'7" or 8. Okay. So 5'6" probably accurate, but either way, 330 batting average in his 103 at-bats last year. So obviously a big sample size there, but 4 homers in that stretch. That's not including that playoff home run he hit that you mentioned, but a 9.51 OPS. So clearly a potent bat here, and it's just time's going to tell with how he's going to kind of mature in the system, not only here in Vancouver, but beyond. He's only 22 years old, and mentioning that injury that he had last year, as he gets further away from that, we should see him continue to blossom into an exciting prospect going forward.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the information here on my fingertips, so I'll find it while we're talking. But I seem to remember Brent having some comments on my episode too about Adrian's play, and Brent delivers it in such a way that only Brent could do that. And I don't know if I can find that clip or put it in this podcast, or see if I have the the audio and video transcribed, because Brent described exactly that. But I want to move on here because there's a number of guys, obviously, that come up in baseball prospectus for the Blue Jays. And just looking at some guys running down here, but this opening day roster, I see a lot of names. I see a guy like Cutter Coffee on there. I see Victor Arias on there. I see Nick Goodwin's returning. I see Jay Harry's returning. I'm always curious what Jackson Hornung's up to too, because I see he's back. I remember, his stints at catcher when the Canadians still had Yomer Hernandez and then released him. I remember, the way Jackson played. He played DH. He played a little bit of left field. What's the plan for Jackson? Because he's back in Vancouver for another year. I don't know, what the organization's plans are, if you have any idea.
Yeah, I think before the season, as you probably know, you'll see all these prospect lists come out, and typically you're not seeing the Jays super high on those lists, typically in the bottom third in the majors as far as, Baseball America, MLB.com, or wherever. But I really think that this system has a ton of depth, and I think our roster really shows that. And you see some of these guys that are back. You mentioned Hornung. He could easily be up in double A. And even Javon Ward in the outfield, he definitely did enough last year. I thought that he could easily start in double A. So I really think that there's kind of a log jam of hitters at this kind of high A, double A level, that there's probably at least 3 or 4 of these guys that could be on a double A roster if they were in a different organization. But just the way things are working out, quite a bit of depth right now. You mentioned Cutter Coffee. Yeah. He had a really nice stint in high A in Boston's organization before coming over in the Danny Jansen trade. Struggled a little bit, so that one kind of makes sense that he'd return to high A. He struggled a bit since that trade. But you see guys like Jay Harry, Adrian Pinto, who we just talked about, Nick Goodwin, who struggled a bit last year, so that one kind of makes sense. But those guys joining, Arjun Namal and Sean Keys and Carter Cunningham, who we talked about earlier, kind of a really sort of vibrant and depth of a group there that I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out as far as playing time, but Jose Mayorga, the new manager stepping in for Brent LaValle, will have his hands full with kind of deciding that.
Yeah, and that's another thing we should talk about too. Let's work these lineups and talk about the managerial change, because I had an email exchange with Brent about it a couple months ago. And I should plug my friends who live in New Hampshire, who run a Society for American Baseball research chapter that I participate in, because their meetings are virtual. And I sent an email to Bruce McClure, who I'll mention on the podcast, and just mention I'm trying to connect Brent with my friend Bruce, who lives in New Hampshire now that Brent's there with the Fisher Cats. But some other names I saw on this side obviously was Javon Ward, and I started following him on Instagram a few months ago. So I saw him post some stuff recently, and can almost leave a comment for him saying, where's he going to be? And then I see this roster, and he's obviously back in Vancouver. But I wonder with him, the way Ward ended the season, how much longer that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I think, like I was saying, it's kind of just that, there's just only so many spots in double A. You see some of the guys that were Canadians last year that are now up in double A, Jace Borfin and Desan Brown. So it kind of makes sense with those two guys moving up. I'm looking at their roster right now. They've got RJ Schreck, Gabriel Martinez, Devontae Brown is back, Yohendrick Penango. So clearly a lot of depth in double A as well in the outfield. So it kind of makes sense when you see what's going on elsewhere in the organization, why you've got guys like Javon Ward that are being held back down in high A. But, as we've kind of told these guys, as we've seen them over the last 24 hours or so, you just got to keep your head down and keep hitting and keep playing well, right, to start the year. Not get too worried about where you are, but if you play well, you're going to advance, right? So that's what these guys got to be worried about at this point. There definitely is a good number of hitters kind of on this roster to start the year, but it just comes they're going to get their playing time eventually, and they've just got to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I even remember Brennan Orfis, another guy who I felt like sometimes last year at the ballpark, when I was there watching games, maybe he was struggling a bit at the plate, and then broke through with a couple of good hits toward the end of the season, especially in the playoffs. And I'm just trying to move over to pitching now, because I have Bo Bonds, Irv Carter, Pat Gallagher, Miranda Munson, Connor O'Halloran, Kai Peterson, Grant Rogers, Che Yeager, Joanne Ross Brown as guys that guys that ring a bell. So let's look at the pitching side, because Watts Brown is another guy that jumps out to me, because I know I commented on the episode with Brent and Jerry back in November, and maybe you and I talked about it too, was the way Watts Brown would pitch games where I seem to remember if it was the game against Spokane in the playoffs or one previous, where the first inning he'd get roughed up with a home run, and then he'd have like 4 or 5 innings where I wouldn't say he would sail through hitters, but he would be very efficient with his pitches after a sort of being caught off guard by a home run, or struggling to sort of get outs maybe early in the game.
Yeah, I think with him, it comes down to throwing strikes, right? You saw him get into issues when he fell behind batters. So maybe giving up some big hits when he fell behind, 3-1, 2-0, or walking guys. But when he's around the strike zone, he gets a ton of swing and miss. I believe he was top 10 in all of minor league baseball last year in whiff rate. So the stuff is clearly there, where he's going to advance quickly in this system, most likely, if he continues to throw strikes. So that was his biggest issue last year, but you saw it towards the end of the year. I think he really peaked late last year. His best start of the year was in that Northwest League Championship Series against Spokane. The one game they won in Vancouver, Watts Brown was on the mound, 10 strikeouts.
Yeah, that's the game I was thinking of. Thank you for reminding me of that, because that's exactly the game I was thinking. I saw really that stat today. Stuff. When I was doing some research, there was some stuff there just about Brown. And actually, I think the picture that I shared off the top of the podcast, for those that are watching on our YouTube channel, it's 2 guys and then the opening day roster. I think it's actually Pinto and Watts Brown. Watts Brown has got his pitching glove throwing a ball in the air. So I think it's actually Brown and Pinto who are on that little cover shot for the C's to promo the new lineup. And I had been looking on the MLB site, but the only team in action this week when I did my update for Batter's Box was Buffalo. So everybody else, including Dunedin, kicks off, I want to say, and you can correct me on this, starting tomorrow, and that starts their season.
Yeah, I believe that's true across the lower minors, AA, high A, where Vancouver is, of course, and low A. So everything's kind of kicking off tomorrow. You got kind of that half-week series. Yeah. So we're in Tri-City for these three games, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll have the off day on Monday, and then 6 in Spokane. So it's a 10-day road trip with 9 games.
Yeah, and that Spokane always evokes special memories for us, doesn't it? just because of last year's rivalry, the games that I saw at the Nat with Spokane, and the playoff games, and just the way Spokane was so strong in the first half last year. The C's were better in the second half. That playoff was really good baseball, but it seems like the games early in the season, I know I had Niall O'Donoghue on earlier in the season last year for my podcast, and the Spokane team did some real damage to us, right? Like there's some games where they really kicked us. And I was looking back at the old lineup cards too, and it was Kyle Karros, right? Eric Karros' son, and there was Dylan Jorge was another one. And so, I was trying to find the Spokane Chiefs lineup today to see if those 3 guys were slotted 1, 2, 3 for Spokane, like they had been against the C's last year.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That team was just a wagon last year, start to finish, right? They won the first half. They won the second half as well. The Canadians got in, of course, as the second place team of the second half, but Spokane won both halves, completely deserved the championship. They were loaded last year, but the good news for the Canadians this year is that team is completely different. If you look at their roster right now on their website, a bunch of those guys, I believe every single guy you just mentioned has moved up to AA. Dion Jorge for sure. Kyle Karros, the MVP of the Northwest League, is clearly moving up. So you saw guys like Chase Dolander and Sean Sullivan in the first half of last year. They've moved up by the second half. So, of course, they're gone now. So looks like a completely different team. So who knows how they're going to be this year. I'm sure they'll still be competitive going forward, but I don't think they're going to be quite that team that we saw in 24.
Yeah, that team was something to watch. And it just felt like they were the Canadians' nemesis all season. And with some of those guys in that lineup, they always seemed to find ways to win. And it was like, even if the Canadians were ahead, and I don't have the lineup card in front of me. I'm thinking it was the Father's Day game from last year against Spokane where they clinched the first half. I mean, they were behind on us and they just kicked us in the last couple innings, right? And they took over. But let's move on to some other stuff here because we've got a Tri-City 3-game series to start the season. But obviously, one of the other big changes, and I had him on the show in November, is obviously the movement of Brent Lavalley up to AA to manage New Hampshire.
Yeah, I think it was maybe a step up in terms of a new opportunity. I know he definitely enjoyed his time in Vancouver and spending multiple seasons here and being from the area, but having a chance to go up into AA and work with some of the same guys that he worked with over the last couple of years, definitely a good opportunity for Brent. So definitely wishing him the best going forward in his career. And then Jose Mayorga coming in. He's the new manager here in Vancouver, and he was up from Dunedin. So kind of both Brent and Jose both moving up a level. Mayorga was the Dunedin Blue Jays manager last year, led that team to a good record. One of the only teams in the organization with an over 500 record. I believe they were 7 or 8 games over 500. And you can imagine with more guys moving up like Arjun Amala and Sean Keys, they've got their manager now that they had last year.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
He moves up with those guys. And I think he's going to be a perfect fit here.
And it makes sense for Brent too, right? Because I'm looking at a press release here on the Fisher Cats website. I mean, I see all the names jump out at me. I see everybody from people like Robert Brooks to Alex DeJesus, Charles McAdoo, Ryan McCarty, Desan Brown, who was obviously a fan favorite here 2 years ago and last year. And I think we're actually giving away a Desan Brown bobblehead at the ballpark this year, if I am
we are indeed,
not mistaken. And so, obviously some familiarity for Brent. But tell me a little more about Jose Mayorga, because I know nothing about him. So I'm obviously going to learn about him this season. I'm going to hear about him through being at games. I'm going to have Niall and hopefully you again on the podcast. So let's talk a little bit about the new C's manager, because I've been reading some stuff on him. Should give a plug to my friend Steve Yoon at the Province, who had written something on that too. So tell me a little bit about Jose, because I know nothing about, was he, a past player in the Blue Jays system, or what's his sort of trajectory?
He wasn't a past player in the he wasn't a past player in the Blue Jays system, but he was in the Phillies system. So he's a former catcher, worked his way up to AA. This is back in 2014 and 15. So he's got that kind of playing career resume, so to speak. And he's kind of been coaching ever since. He's from Panama. So he's coached coached Team Panama at various international tournaments. So kind of an impressive resume there. And then the last couple of years with Dunedin. So I think he just did a really nice job with those Dunedin Blue Jays and kind of given the opportunity to move up a level. I've had a chance to talk to him a couple times already, obviously just meeting him yesterday and then on the team bus here today. But I've really enjoyed talking to him in the last little bit, obviously just in the preliminary kind of conversations, but seems like a really nice guy and seems to already kind of has a kind of a stranglehold on the team and kind of the vibe of the team. And it's obviously those kind of things are still working their way out and they'll continue to as the season goes along, but really seems like a fun guy. And I think it's going to be a good year here in Vancouver.
Yeah. It just seems kind of odd to not have Brent there, but Niall and I talked about that last year in my podcast, that he was surprised that, Brent was back for his third year. And then there was obviously that wacky year of COVID where Brent was supposed to manage. And then, that season was canceled. And then we played 2021 in Hillsborough. So, good things happening for Brent too, because obviously a guy like John Schneider was in Vancouver, over a decade ago. So you hope down the road for somebody like Brent, does he make it up to AAA with the Buffalo Bisons? And obviously he's part of the Blue Jays organization, but I just wonder what other things are in store for Brent as well.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to as a player, right? Player or manager, once you've made it to AA, you're kind of on the doorstep, right? AAA is kind of sometimes viewed as that sort of veterans league. where players that have been in the major leagues kind of may come up and down from to AAA. So AAA can kind of be viewed as that, but AA is really that first spot where you're in striking distance of the major leagues. And I think that's true even as a manager. I think if Brent has a good season or two in New Hampshire, I think he'll definitely kind of put him in position to possibly, be a candidate for a Blue Jays manager job if that opportunity arises. You never know how things are going to shake out with John Schneider in Toronto, but if an opportunity arises, I think Brent certainly is someone that can and will be a good fit for that job. So that'll be interesting to kind of track as the years go forward here.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Chris. I know you had a busy day and you want to relax a bit tonight. So thanks for doing this. Really looking forward to coming to the ballpark to watch some games and hopefully catch up with you there. We'll let you go. Good luck to you guys on the call tomorrow. I'm looking forward to listening in.
Awesome, Ben. Thanks for having me and look forward to seeing you soon.
Take care of yourself, Chris. We'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks,
bye-bye.
Ben.